I welcome you here to Tiki, your podcast for consciousness, health, and happiness. I'm Sandra, and today I've chosen the topic of truthfulness for us because it's so important in this day and age, especially in this time of change, to recognize what really matters within ourselves and how we then also change our impact in the world, how we can sharpen our clairvoyant senses, and how we also awaken qualities such as telepathy quite naturally within us. So the topic of truthfulness goes far beyond that. Just be a bit more honest and don't pretend. It goes much deeper. And yes, I invite you on a journey, kind of a bit through my own path and then crossing over into this particular topic. I, as Sandra, have been used to being somehow a bit different my whole life. And in the meantime, for many years now, I've been totally happy with it. And I lead a life that is fulfilled and happy and also healthy on all levels, no matter whether it's about relationships, success, health, or other topics. I simply put myself in the happy and free situation many years ago where everything comes easily to me and I can use my creative power so that the canvas of my life onto which I, as a projector, am constantly projecting is one that I like, that it plays the film that I also choose. But I've also lived through completely different sides, completely different times and sides of myself too. And I thought that I'd just like to tell you a bit about myself for a few minutes as an introduction to make the core message of this podcast somehow more tangible later on. Because when I speak of truthfulness, I don't mean any individual situations where you shouldn't lie anymore or shouldn't hide anymore, but I really go very deep with it. And as you will hear later, it's also about the old and the new world, about our relationships, and about what we are now consciously choosing and creating. Or even unconsciously, but consciously is definitely smarter. It's about being able to live our advanced abilities again, such as using our clairvoyant senses correctly, like clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, clairaudience, which we also train in the Tiki seminars, but it varies a lot how much people can already use that. And the topic of telepathy is also becoming increasingly prominent right now and will become very present in the coming years, even if it still sounds far off now. It's no longer far off. And so many people simply wish to be able to use all these senses more strongly, but at the same time don't understand which foundations are also necessary for that. Because if the foundation is missing, then all of that won't work or will only work very limitedly. And the foundation that is a very deep self-acceptance and self-love in combination with deep trust in life itself and in all the processes we are guided through. Yes, how did I learn to be truthful? Osho once said that every child must be corrupted in order to even attain the maturity to be able to distinguish. That sentence somehow moved me back then. I thought about it a lot. Yes, he practically says you have to leave the unity to be able to return to it and then also know how to appreciate it. Somehow that's a pity, but at least in my case, I can understand the statement well because for me it happened absolutely like that and I can still remember a lot. So I'm sure that you, when you hear this now, might also recognize yourself here and there or say, yes, it could have been like that for me too, or I know it that way. But maybe you then drew different conclusions from it, or maybe you weren't so aware of it. And maybe it was the same for you, but you buried it deep inside you and well, maybe don't even remember anymore because many people can't remember their early childhood that well anyway, and that's also why I want to maybe help you a bit with my story to close such gaps. So even as a small child, I was always very sensitive. I perceived a lot, and I was among people who loved me very much and wanted the best for me, but who didn't recognize what was going on with me and how they might also be able to support me there. So I was basically treated well, you could say, but I just couldn't be challenged in my predispositions, talents, and abilities in any way because the knowledge and access to it was simply lacking in the adult caregivers. And it wasn't just about feelings and perceptions in my case that were special, but also about things like, for example, this synesthetic perception that I always had. So with numbers or colors or smells or even tones, I usually handle things differently than others because for me, everything is perceivable at the same time. So for example, I don't just see a number, but this number is embedded into a shape, into a sequence of numbers. And number sequences in turn also have shapes, colors, and specific directions. So they can also appear wavy then, but all of that always made sense to me and simply deepened the understanding of numbers enormously, yeah. But of course, you don't proceed in a classic way then, but a bit differently. For example, even as a child, really as an elementary school child, I always calculated digit sums. So I calculated the birth dates of people I know as digit sums. I calculated phone numbers as digit sums, sometimes even the license plates of the cars driving in front of us, all sorts of things, and I sometimes asked myself, why am I actually doing this? Is something wrong with me? And only much later, when I dealt with numerology and such, did I realize, yes, that made total sense. And I already brought that with me, this knowledge, because I then also knew, for example, that the 5 has a different quality than the 7 or the 2. And so I was already on a good track, even without having read any books. But of course, as I said, for a child who can't really communicate that and doesn't learn anything about it anywhere, it's also a bit strange. Yes, so for example, when the calendar was explained to me for the first time, I saw a huge mandala there. That was a masterpiece of design in my inner perception. And yeah, even if you play music for me or if I hear individual tones, I can also feel them. So that you feel music, you surely know that. And for me, it's also tones that I can feel so much that they can actually cause me physical pain if they, well, don't have a good vibration, these tones. So it was also always difficult for me when it was louder somewhere. Even in kindergarten, I remember that it was simply often too loud for me. Yeah, and as I said, as a child, you can't yet recognize or name or formulate it like that because you don't even know what it would be that you actually want to say or what you would actually need. The maturity is just not there yet. But I always felt that something was missing, not only in my world, but in this world. That something wasn't right and that something wasn't correct about how we live and how adults do things and teach us. And yeah, by we, I mean so many families, not just our own. I mean all people by that. I just saw how there was dishonesty everywhere, how people were unhappy and were putting on a show somewhere. And I also remember that I often felt much older than others, so not just other children, but I often even found the adults totally childish because I could perceive that they were only acting happy, although they actually felt quite differently, or because I could perceive how unhappy they were. And their voices, like when they get too high, get too shrill, when they want to somehow feign joy and want to make you believe something that just isn't there, that isn't real. And yes, because I could perceive that the looks that were sometimes exchanged there didn't speak of love and trust. And so my perception was always sharp and perhaps also different from some other children, although, as I said, I'm already convinced that many felt the same way as I did, who may have forgotten it by now or still remember it just as I do. Somehow you have two worlds. There's your own laughs with this perception, and then the one you participate in. And you somehow get pulled into this show because a child doesn't say to adults, why are you pretending like that now? You're actually not happy at all right now. Yes, so you also take part in this matrix, in this game somewhere. And somehow it's exhausting when these worlds don't fit together. Somehow the need to bring these worlds together grows over the years. You're also taught through school and such that you have to conform. And with that, this need grows to be conformist, even if that doesn't actually spring from our nature. You don't actually want to be as fake as the others, but the alternative becomes increasingly exhausting. And that's how it was for me too, and that's why I eventually dove into this other world. I hid my deeper perceptions from myself and simply participated in the 3D collective. Yes, I was just like the others were, even though everyone is unique. But there's a certain track that everyone then follows. And yes, as I said, the word matrix always fits well here. And that's where I really plugged in. So somehow it was easier then for a few years. Or I thought that it might be easier that way. Because you simply think less and you can swim along better with the crowd. And I've had many, many experiences, and today I'm incredibly grateful to have had these experiences. And I could also understand better and better why the world works like that and why so many people do it that way too. In a way, that's a relinquishing of responsibility. I do it like everyone else. I don't think for myself anymore. I don't check for myself anymore and so on. That can actually be comfortable for a while too, but some things I just couldn't get used to them. They were still really repugnant to me and I couldn't go along with them. For example, when it came to forming little groups and gossiping and excluding others, picking on minorities, which in the background always means creating one's own lack, one's own pain in others, and that didn't work. I could never do that. So I couldn't suppress the perception enough for that to be okay for me. But basically, I could also see it differently than before, as a very sensitive and compassionate child. And yes, as a teenager, I was much cooler, of course. Yes, my life had many facets, and because of that, I was always with all kinds of very different people. Some were younger, others were much older, some were more the intellectuals, the educated ones, and others partied every week until they dropped. I could always get along with everyone. Also, nationalities, skin colors, that was never important to me. It was always the person who counted. And the moment, so what brought us together? Do I have a resonance with you or not? But I also saw that this was not welcomed in the Matrix, because that doesn't fit into the pigeonhole again, how a person should be or how I as a girl should be. But all the judging, splitting off, all the thinking in categories of better and worse, we are better than you or they are better than the others, that never really worked for me, and I could never feel it that way. And the struggle to still have these two worlds over and over again, so it continued just on a different level. And the more I oriented myself towards the outside to somehow cope there, the more I lost myself. And this experience, it was important. It was really important. I also describe all of this in detail in my book, Tiki, Develop Yourself. It really affected all areas of my life, no matter if it was partnerships that went completely wrong, whether it was friendships that were just always difficult, just like some family relationships, or also with colleagues. I simply found it difficult, and perhaps the people with me did too. I think most people find it difficult with each other somehow because they're not being real. And at some point, my body also spoke up when I developed Hashimoto's, but I was also sick a lot otherwise, telling me that I'm not in the flow at all anymore and that I can't go on like this. And during that time, I also had several key moments that moved me to wake up again, and where I decided that it's just not worth it. It's much too exhausting not to be myself. No matter what the external consequences will be, this inner chaos must be cleared away. I wanted to be myself again. And I also wrote about one of these key moments in this book, Tiki, Develop Yourself. That was after a truly devastating and life-changing message that it didn't at all, well, how should I say, it catapulted me to the highest heights instead of being devastating, although it actually should have been. But in that moment, I experienced my true self again. And it catapulted me to heights that simply showed me that everything we experience here in this life is, in a way, not real at all. It's part of the matrix, or to put it another way, it's a level of experience for our soul. a level of experience that we can experience as a magnificent multidimensional being. But when we are conscious of ourselves again, then we know about these levels of experience. And also that our true self can always oversee everything and stands above it and can choose anew at any time. We can choose who we are and what we're experiencing ourselves as right now and what else we want to experience, but we don't just choose that by saying, yes, I want to, but with our whole being. So we also have to work on ourselves a bit there, but more on that later. And I've had situations like that over and over again in my life. And I finally realized that in those moments, my soul has access to me, that is, to my incarnated little self. And the soul, it speaks up, it has its ways of correcting things when it's no longer being heard. And if we don't listen at all anymore, then this communication also happens through so-called strokes of fate, or with illnesses or other tangible problems that then lead us back to the main road. So it's like when you keep straying to the right and left of your golden path, but the soul always manages to push you back into the middle, as long as you're not completely off track and haven't completely lost yourself. As long as you're still listening somehow. Yes, and luckily I listened and I opened up again, and I felt that familiar, adventurous feeling again and learned to love just being myself again. Unpredictable, honest, wild and free and present and full of love, no matter how others are and no matter what others think about it. We can't control that anyway. It doesn't matter. Simply because I'm here to be me and because there's no better version of me than myself. And not of you either. And because after all the artificiality, it feels so wonderfully, incredibly good to truly serve the divine in everything. So I had arrived again, and through my clear perception of what I really am and what was just imposed on me, what was artificial, which in a way is imposed on everyone in this matrix, I was able to find quick and effective ways to now simply transform everything in love that I am not, and to be more and more clearly what I am. Or to put it another way, to free myself from my ego layers, letting my true self shine through more and more clearly. Yes, and free from traumas, free from programs, mechanisms, external energies, limiting beliefs, and all those layers that have only covered up the true self until now. Life is really much, much better. And that's how Tiki was born back then. The rest is history. And even though it was often hard not knowing who I am or how life works here, or even though it was often so painful that I saw no point in going on, today I'm all the more grateful to have experienced it all and to have emerged so enriched, and yes, also refined from that process. And yes, in hindsight, I have to agree completely with Osho. Through the loss of childhood innocence, you experience yourself as everything you are and can be. And if you do that consciously, then you can lead the most beautiful life you could possibly choose. Yes, and now I want to add a little something to my story because it's also so important. It's about the clairsenses, about memories. And this whole perception has also developed enormously for me over the last 10, 15 years. And through that, I also learned to look through time, to perceive other incarnations and understand what is influencing the present, to recognize and heal connections in the ancestral line. And also to receive all the important information about history, some of which I've summarized in my book Involution. Simply through these retrospectives, a different insight into history naturally emerges than what is sometimes written in our textbooks. And my entire Tiki system with all its comprehensive content came about because I remembered how it works and what was always there. So I don't take credit for it at all, like I developed Tiki. No, I remembered, because I uncovered my true self more and more, and through that my clair senses became clearer and clearer. And that's what I'm getting at. Every human can do that, and so can you. I am absolutely convinced of that. The only question is how many layers still shroud your true self, and how can you recognize and transform these layers? And very importantly, are you ready when you transform all of this to also accept the changes that may result from it in your life? Because yes, there is nothing with which you have to strengthen your true self. It is already perfect. Everything is already there. Everything is laid out within you. It's about the layers that want to be released. And that's exactly what you can do with tiki. At your own pace, just the way you want it. Some people just take the whole buffet right away, and others take small bites. And everything is okay. And once your true self is uncovered again, then the rest comes by itself. Your clairvoyant senses, they are part of your basic equipment. Telepathy is part of your basic equipment. All of that is simply available to you. It's just that if it doesn't quite work yet, it's still hidden. And it is hidden because you are not yet quite yourself, because you are still plugged into the matrix, because there are still layers surrounding you, because you are not yet quite truly yourself. And yes, why is it so important to be truthful in this time of change? We'll get to telepathy later, but for now, let's bridge the gap from my story to all of us in today's world. And it's a special time, it's an exciting time, an unpredictable, wild, new time that is dawning here. And this wildness and truthfulness, it's in every one of us, in you, in me, in everyone. At the bottom of our hearts, we are all adventurers. Our true self is beyond all conditioning, and it wants to be lived again. It wants to take the lead again. If we don't live it, then we miss the purpose of our incarnation, then we don't fulfill why we actually came here. Because this life, and also the current time with all the challenges and changes, invites us collectively and individually to find out again what we really are, what we really want, and why we actually incarnated here in the first place. In the new world, in the new age that we are all moving into, we are developing our multidimensionality more and more, and with it all the functions and clairvoyant senses that are within us. We are multidimensional beings who are currently experiencing ourselves in a very limited way and are gradually letting go of this limitation. Our perspective is widening. We understand ourselves more and more in multiple dimensions and realities. And in those, in turn, as creators of our own world. And I've already talked a lot about the ascension process, no matter where, in videos, in podcasts, and of course in the book Involution. Therefore, I won't go into more detail now. I'm taking it as a given. Otherwise, I'd have to repeat myself in every podcast. So that's simply the basis of everything I do here, the knowledge of the ascension process, of the transformation. And I'd like to give you a few questions right now to help you understand yourself better and bring your true self to light. And I'm going to read these questions to you one by one now, and I simply recommend pressing pause briefly after each question and finding the answer within yourself. Maybe you'll also write down one thing or another that you can later transform or reprogram with Tiki. Even if you don't find a definite answer, just the question itself and then opening the space for a possible answer invites the universal consciousness and will change something in your field. And it can be worthwhile to go through these questions again every now and then. So you can write them down or put this podcast on again and go through these questions for yourself once more. And you'll probably be amazed at how much your field has already changed, and how some answers simply come much more clearly, or how some answer fields are becoming more and more richly populated. Let's get started. Who am I? Who do I want to be? Where in my life am I still denying myself, I wonder? Where am I denying my values? Where am I not yet living my truth? What exactly did I bring with me here into this incarnation, into this particular lifetime? What wants to be created through me in this world? What could be my first steps toward that? What specific action is intended to be performed through me as your assistant? Yes, and maybe you're also wondering why right now, here today? Why this call to action to do it now? Can't I just postpone it again? The answer is because we are now in this fantastic, unique time of change. And in the ascension process of Earth and humanity, it's exactly about letting go of everything false, everything that you are not. Everything the old matrix has done to you, and where you're still plugged into the old matrix because you think that's who you are, or because you hold something as true that was just a concept of the old world. All of that wants to be let go of now. And you can't ascend with that either. You cannot keep it. That is old, heavy, nasty 3D baggage. And that won't get you any further on your path into the new world. And yes, believe me, I know that looking at it can hurt. And letting go can hurt all over again. But the reward is you. Truly you. With all your beauty, with your perfection and presence. And the gift at the end is always greater than everything that comes before. Treat yourself. And now we come to the topic of telepathy. And I tell you, without truthfulness, specifically pervasive, essential truthfulness in your being, there's no telepathy. Let me explain that. So in the new world, we will communicate via telepathy again. And the new world is already emerging. It's already here. It's already beginning. And even if that might still seem abstract to you, it's not far away at all. We're all doing it already, and everyone already knows it to some extent in their own way. For example, when you think of someone who then gets in touch, or when you also hear what someone doesn't say but thinks and feels while they're speaking. And all of this will become many times more concrete when we've all truly arrived in 5D. Then we will perceive and use all of our senses again. Also clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, clairaudience, and much more that goes beyond that. In 5D, we will once again fully master the art of telepathy. And it's specifically about making no distinction anymore between what one thinks and feels and what one then communicates to the other. Because when thinking, feeling, and radiance form a unity, form a field, then we no longer need words. Because the other person can receive all of that like an information package, so to speak, that you simply send off. But the prerequisite for this state is the clarification of one's own being. And without this clarification, you can neither send anything out cleanly and clearly, nor receive anything, because there will always be overlaps from everything else. And that's why the transition to it will also be partly confusing, because some are already further along in it than others. They've already done a better job of clearing things out, they're already sending clear messages, and the others just aren't there yet. Or what you're sending out, some understand it, others don't. And so it can happen that you're already very far along, but then you notice more and more that other people say something completely different from what reaches you energetically. And maybe it's already like that now, or has been for a long time, but you'll become even more aware that you can rely on it. And you can, if you want, then of course also lovingly reflect back to the person you're talking to that you do indeed notice the differences. That would be the next level, to naturally invite others to be truthful as well, because they realize the other way doesn't work anymore. Of course, it can also happen to you that you don't say what you're thinking, and then you notice that the person you're talking to noticed it anyway. So the new era reveals everything and thus brings us onto a very truthful path. And that's great. This path is absolutely worth taking. It's brilliant. We'll also be in communication more and more with the higher dimensions and, for example, from our soulmates. who support us from these dimensions, that is, support us from higher dimensions or are also incarnated with us, will receive impulses and ideas, and will also recognize more and more clearly where these come from. So, up until now, you might have received some impulse and thought it was your idea, or it just somehow came from the spiritual realm or from above. And now you'll be able to distinguish and assign it more and more clearly. You'll know exactly, okay, that was someone from my spiritual family, from my spiritual team, or that was telepathy from my best friend, or that was Grandpa, who's already passed away and sent me something from his dimension. And so it doesn't have to stop at individual ideas, but can develop into a very, very beautiful collaboration. There can really be, well, I don't want to call them conversations directly because I don't perceive question and answer conversations or anything like that, but rather these information packages, so that we can really receive a lot in word and image and feeling and knowledge, and that it all comes together as a whole. And then, for example, we can also contact other people mentally at any time, no matter where they are. So we can exchange ideas much more clearly than when we speak with our physical mechanics. We can send whole images, films, emotional packages, so our recipient understands the situation in all its complexity, which is often impossible with words, or you'd have to explain for 1 hour. So instead of complicated and giving off ornate phrases, the simplicity of a clear, truthful transmission serves us. And here again, the aspect of selflessness comes into play, because we should also notice if the person contacted doesn't have time or doesn't feel like it right now, or is already communicating elsewhere. And we should then withdraw again, without imposing ourselves, without disturbing, and also without feeling rejected or unimportant because of it. You see, there's still a lot in there that can be a stumbling block to really being able to have a clear effect here, and that is our power of impact. So we should have the respect at all times to only send an offer, but not to impose anything. Conversely, we don't want to be ambushed like that either, but rather choose whether we have the time and inclination or not. And yes, a callback, so to speak, is possible at any time from both sides. So the telephone is basically the precursor to what will be possible later. And as long as we haven't developed this selflessness within us, we won't reach the highest form of telepathy, because then we would really only create chaos, and that is our protection. It's very important. Choose for yourself with your whole being. So it's about your conscious choice. How do you want to live? Which world do you belong to? Do you belong to the old or the new world? Do you want to be involved in an artificial show again, which is currently being taken so ad absurdum that no one can sugarcoat it anymore? Or do you want to dive into something real, something deep, wild, honest, but maybe also a bit more unpredictable? Do you want to give space again to the life that flows through you? Do you want to really look others in the eyes again? To be honest and naked, and also to endure and even love the sight of others when they are honest and naked, quite honestly. Truthfulness isn't just being a bit more honest, but truthfulness carries your inner self completely visibly to the outside. And precisely because of that, it draws the right people into your life. So where you used to be afraid to really show yourself because it could be embarrassing, being laughed at, you don't fit in anymore, you're no longer conforming, whatever, exactly that now wants to be lived in a redeemed form. And exactly then, the people come into your life who are just like that, who fit you now. And here too, a meaningful redistribution is currently taking place. In the old matrix, it's still called division. I deliberately speak of meaningful redistribution because, yes, that's exactly what's expected of us now, and we're also gifted with exactly that, namely truthfulness. The more clearly we radiate our own unique energy, the more clearly we resonate with the perfectly matching souls with whom we may have been together since time immemorial, incarnating together again and again. Is there a greater reward? Is there anything more beautiful? And so it's now up to us to fully develop this truthfulness within ourselves. And I know that requires courage and honesty. And it requires mindfulness with yourself, with your thoughts, with your feelings, with your words, and of course, actions. And that you perceive when something doesn't fit together yet. And so we grow, and so we recognize more and more what it's actually about. And that's exactly why we're here now. Exactly, that is our fine-tuning. Exactly for that reason. We are now invited in this brilliant time to look even more closely and dissolve everything that we are not in order to be what we truly are. Truthfulness is love. Love for life, love for truth, love for being. Truthfulness is perfection. And a good start would be if we began to look each other truthfully in the eye again. Maybe you can reintroduce that today. I look forward to seeing you. And of course, I'm also happy if you share this post if you like it. And it helps. Thank you from the heart. I'm glad you're here. See you soon.